Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in, whether you are listening on your normal podcast provider or you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube. We appreciate your support. And today we're going to talk about disability, and in particular, the Liberal Democrat Disability Association. What does it mean? What can we do better as a party? What can you do better as a local party member? And how can we make it easier and better for people with disabilities to campaign? How do we get more people elected who have disabilities? And what do we overlook as a party, whether both individually or as a group? So we have a fantastic array of people to speak to us today. And so first up, I'll talk to Councillor Louie Hamblett. Hello, Louie. Well, introduce yourself to the podcast.
Hello, hi. Obviously, I am a councillor, as it says there. I'm a councillor for Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council and Shaw Crompton Parish Council as well, so I'm dual-hatted. And I have Asperger's, particularly autism, and I was also born with multiple heart complex defects as well.
Thank you, Louie. And we now go to Victoria Evans. Introduce yourself, Victoria. How are you doing?
Hi, thanks, John. So I'm Victoria. I'm from London Lib Dems. I'm currently Vice Chair of LDDA, Lib Dem Disability Association, and I'm also on the executive of the Lib Dem Health and Care Association. So I'm here to talk about the fact that I'm autistic. I'm very pro autistic rights and more research into autism and autistic people, and also to talk about LDDA and what we're doing going forward, particularly concerning obviously autistic rights in light of the policy motion that was just passed at Spring Conference.
Thank you very much. And last but by no means least, we have Katherine Macy. Hello, Katherine.
Hello, so I'm Katherine. I wear many hats in the party. I'm here today as Young Liberals Accessibility, Diversity and Standards Officer, as well as the Liberal Democrat Disability Association Press Officer. And I've written the policy motion that recently passed at Federal Conference, as well as being a PhD student studying autism, specifically in the Stone Age, so not too much psychology. But I'm also autistic. I was diagnosed at the age of 10, and ever since I've been very interested in promoting not just autistic rights, but autistic people fighting and speaking on their own behalf.
Lovely. And before we go into the rest of the chat, we should just point out, if any of you are interested in either joining or knowing more about the Liberal Democrat Disability Association, you can check out their website at disabilitylibdems.org.uk. Are you guys on Facebook, Twitter, anything like that?
Yes, we have a Twitter at DisabilityLib, I believe it is. And we have a Facebook group, but that's for members only. So if you do want to join, then please feel free to join the Facebook group where you can chat with other members.
Lovely. And as we've seen from lockdown, a lot of these chats and groups have been absolutely invaluable to people who have felt, well, I'm on my own somewhere. There's always help out there within the Lib Dem. So I do encourage you to go check out those groups. But let's talk about the policy motion, actually. You've mentioned it. And Victoria, do you want to start us off about the policy motion at conference? And why did you feel the need to do it? And what else does the party need to get a grip of?
Very good question, and there's a lot of work has been done and a lot of work to be done. I think it might be best if I pass on to Katherine in this case, since Katherine wrote the motion. It would be great to hear from Katherine first.
Okay, Katherine, go on then. You take us away.
So yeah, I'd written a motion before, the carers motion, and I saw obviously how quickly that got picked up by the party. And in my experience as both an autistic person and as a researcher, it's shocking how far we have to go and how little we've actually come. For example, the R word is still used in published academic papers. The most recent one I found being published in 2016. That's been peer reviewed by multiple people. I also know people who've struggled to publish because a peer reviewer has said, you've not acknowledged how autism might be caused by your environment, which we know for a fact is not the case. And it's just really disheartening to look around and see how difficult it is. And it ties into how most people are now calling Autism Month acceptance, not awareness. Because most people know what autism is. Most people have seen Atypical on Netflix or the A Word on BBC. But they don't actually understand and accept the differences and how every autistic person, much like every neurotypical or non-autistic person, is different. And with so much disability activism, it's about actually overcoming and taking down the barriers, and by meeting us halfway. And it's so easy to meet so many autistic people halfway, just by allowing them space to calm down sometimes, warning them if there's going to be loud noises or flashing lights, accepting the quirks. Like, I have penguin everything, and the amount of people that will raise their eyebrows or laugh at me for that, when ultimately it's just a small quirk that I have, is really disheartening, let alone the fact that so many autistic people are unemployed, so many autistic people end up having to engage in the justice system, and even when they're witnesses, they get treated so poorly. There's so many issues that are such an easy fix in my mind, but society isn't actually ready to acknowledge that. And I think the Liberal Democrats is the home of acknowledging these issues first. So I wrote a motion, took it to Young Liberals, they liked it, we passed it, and then we put it forward for federal. I was very grateful that FCC liked it. We had help with drafting, and now it's policy, and it's very exciting.
And I suppose that's why we're in the Lib Dems, isn't it? This is one of the reasons why that members like yourself can make an actual difference, not just to our party, but we've seen going forward, sometimes where Lib Dems lead, other parties follow, and that's whether that was, gay marriage and things like. Lib Dems really drove that way forward before anyone else, even before Stonewall and other people came on board. So no, that, I mean, congratulations is the book. Where else do we go now? Or, I mean, Victoria, Louie, do you want to come in on this? And where do you think we should go? What are the next steps we can do?
I mean, I think it's interesting because there are so many different issues if we look at the detail of the policy as well. So it covers things such as, obviously general acceptance issues, but also, there are postcode lotteries in terms of trying to get a diagnosis. There are issues with access to work. There are some really quite staggering statistics when you look at how many people who identify as autistic or have an autism diagnosis are actually in full-time work versus how many people aren't but would like to be. It's somewhere around 70% of autistic people would like to be in work but aren't, and we need to look at how that's happening and how we can break down some of these barriers to work, whether that's just finding the right place to work, whether it is getting those reasonable adjustments, whether it's just in some cases quite basic in terms of understanding and unconscious bias. It is possible that unconscious bias is a really quite significant factor in whether autistic people can, obviously get through the interview stage and obviously stay in work long term. So that's something that I'm quite keen to look at in detail. But I have to say, I mean, as an autistic person in the Lib Dems, I think being in the Lib Dems is fantastic as an autistic person. It's one of the best experiences I've had in terms of extracurricular activities in general. So I think that's something we can definitely obviously shout about, but there is a lot more work to do in terms of including autistic people in activities in the party, and particularly accessible campaigning, and other issues as well.
Louie, how have you, as a councillor, how has it been for you dealing with these issues as a councillor?
Well, for me, so one of my colleagues actually turned around to me and said, "You seem to wear it like a badge on your sleeve," and I said, "Well, yes, I do, but I actually use it more as a shield, and the reason why I do that is because, and that's not as if it protects me, but it's there to sort of, I'm more front facing. I tell people that yes, I'm autistic, yes, I'm openly gay, and yes, these are the, this is me, this is who I am, this is what you're going to get, and then that way there are no secrets, there's no ambiguities to who I am, because in that way they know who they're dealing with. And when it comes to other issues, I mean, one of the things that I did inadvertently, because of my wonderful mind, is I actually walked into a meeting with a room full of social workers, and I just sat there and said, "Oh, hi, I'm Louie, what's your disability?" Now, I didn't necessarily mean to say it sort of popped out there. And I just sort of went, bang. And a bit like, how Katherine collects unicorns. I think Sorry, not unicorns, penguins. I collect unicorns. There's lots of unicorn things around the place. I just seem to do that, much to the bemusement of my wonderful partner. And lots of things. I mean, I do a lot of gaming as well, but that doesn't mean to say that changes me as a person. I just seem to have this very mildly childlike mind. Somebody said, "Oh yes, you're 20 years old, but you seem to have more of a mental age of a 13-year-old." No, that's not the case, and that's not the way autistic people are, and that's not the way we think, or I think anyway. I just look at the world differently. You may go at a problem head on. I may go at a problem in a really windy road. I just seem to do things differently. That doesn't mean to say that I'm crazy, bizarre, or whatever. I just do things differently to how you do it. And now, of course, I chair the Autism Way Forward board in Oldham, which apparently hasn't met for a number of years. And I basically slammed my hands on the desk and was like, why has it not been meeting? Why is this not happening? Why has the administration, which is Labour ran, not done anything about it? And basically put a boot up people's backsides and just said, this is got to happen.
Hello, John from the Lib Dem Podcast here. We are delighted to say that this episode is sponsored by Prater Rains. Now more than ever, you need a professional-looking online presence and website. Prater Rains have been helping Liberal Democrat campaigns succeed for 18 years. Their Lib Dem Foci package combines a website, social media and email system to help Lib Dems win. You'll receive great support from real people, fair pricing and a huge range of features to choose from. Prater Rains are already the bespoke developers for Lighthouse, Lib Dem Draw Online and the LD Directory. They combine a talented system design with an unrivaled understanding of our party, our data and our systems. To find out more, check out the Prater Rains website at praterrains.co.uk/liberal-democrats. This podcast has been sponsored by the Katora Coffee Club, the UK's most environmentally friendly coffee club. There are over 400 independent roasters in the UK, each one crafting coffee in their own unique style. Katora Coffee Club works with some of the best to take you on a voyage of coffee discovery. The Katora Coffee Club delivers ethically sourced and independently roast coffee directly to your door. Each month you'll receive between 2 and 4 bags of coffee and their monthly extract magazine. Even better for Lib Dem podcast listeners, use the code BETTERCOFFEE to save 5% on subscriptions and gift boxes for a limited time only. All Katora Coffee Club boxes are carbon negative and offset the CO2. So why not do some good, enjoy some great coffee and check out the website www.katoracoffeeclub.com. Now, back to the podcast.
We've actually got things going, talking about having not tokenistic quiet days during Autism Awareness week or month, quiet times in our shopping centre just to have no music being piped, but once a week, or have a quiet space within the shopping centre of once, an actual room where people can go and just have a real quiet time if they're feeling stressed or anxious. So that was one of the things that was like a big thing that we managed to discuss.
And going on the Lib Dem Disability Association's website, one of the things that is very keen to put out there is that disability issues shouldn't be seen as an afterthought. But I do get the impression that it is something that the nation has not grasped, particularly about some of the, like, I can't remember now who said it, that unconscious bias that we have sometimes towards people with disabilities, whether mental or physical. The fact is, when you see small steps of improvement, such as someone using a disabled toilet and the disabled toilet now says not all disabilities are visible, but that just shows you how far we've still got to go, doesn't it? Definitely,
yeah. It's good that obviously we're making progress, but still there's so much work to do. And it's also the fact that, sometimes there is sort of this idea that non-disabled people will decide for disabled people what they can and can't do. Whereas, if a disabled person is applying for a position or they want to go out campaigning, they want to do something, it's normally because they can. And if those reasonable adjustments are in place, then there's no reason why disabled people can't achieve the same things as other people. And that's something that we're working towards, obviously.
And
Yeah,
go on. No, carry on.
Yeah, so 25% of the population are estimated to have some form of disability. And it's shocking to me, some of the statistics. So I think under 20% of people with learning disabilities voted in the 2017 general election. They're disengaged from politics because no one is speaking for them. And I think, like Victoria said, a disabled person knows what they can't do and wouldn't put them forward for something that they can't do. I know that I struggle with club nights. So when I applied to be a bartender at my student union, I said in the interview, I need to be in a slightly quieter bar and I can't do club nights. And they're more than willing to do that reasonable adjustment for me. But not everywhere is. And that's the issue there. The fact that disabled people make up a huge population. And my research has shown me that the first people with disabilities who survived beyond just their disability date back 2 million years. We as a society should be used to giving compassion and engaging disabled people, but we've forgotten it in whatever's happened in the last couple hundred years, because we've become so focused on what we think we should be, and disabled people don't fit into the what we should be category. I'm very lucky that I look physically able, even if I do have other disabilities as well as my autism. And even then, I do experience huge amounts of discrimination, let alone someone who does look physically disabled. And I think that's what politics is forgetting. And again, just to reiterate, disabled people know what they can do. And I think we had one incident where a blind candidate was told, but how are you going to get around the constituency? Which is ridiculous, because they can probably get around now, and being an MP won't change that. If anything, it will probably help them, because they'll probably have more people being able to help them get around. And we need to trust that disabled people know themselves and know what they need and their reasonable adjustments. And we don't need people telling us what we need, especially if we've asked for something else.
Louis?
Oh, you hit a really good point and nail on the head. Sorry if I sound a bit robotic, because my internet's a bit, it's gone a bit gaga. You absolutely hit a nail on the head, because recently, and as John will attest to, a lot of councils have just gone through a major budgeting exercise and have had to, sort out all their budgets and had to say, oh, we've got no money here, so we're going to, take from here to pay there and all that rest. And one of the things was obviously member support. And basically they've said, oh, we can't help when it comes to letter writing. My handwriting's horrendous. Or my administrational skills are just not, I'm all right at responding to people's emails. I can do that. I'm good at picking up a phone. I actually quite like talking to people on a phone. I'm okay with that. But when it comes to having to find, when people say, "Oh, just email it through," but what's the email address for that department? I'm not good at sometimes referencing back to some things. I do get a bit confused. So we used to have, we still have district teams of sorts. These cluster teams, but they seem to become a little bit hostile to us, and I don't know whether that's politically or not, because we seem to be in a big Labour run council. But the thing I find is that they don't seem to have made enough adjustments, because, and I'm not just saying because I'm autistic, but because if anybody else has any other disability, I just find they're not making reasonable adjustments, whether it comes to admin support or letter writing, or even when it comes to say anything else, sort of, can you just proofread this for me? I've got a wonderful partner who helps me out proofreading, but just minor things like that, it's really helpful, because you don't want to be sort of mistyping a letter up and then it comes out as something that looks like a 5-year-old's done it, because that might, as I say, my spelling and handwriting skills are horrendous. And so heaven to Betsy what it's like on a keyboard. And I just think that sorry, John.
No, carry on, finish your point. It's okay.
No, I just say so when I understand the process of needing to cost save, but at the same time, cost saving shouldn't also come at a detrimental effect to whether it becomes to members or other people's disability, disability needs. And one of the things I had a massive argument with, because I'm the shadow member for health and adult social care here, and our director of adult social services said, but we're spending so much money on people with mental health needs, for over £16 million or something. I think it was 60 million or 6 million, something like that. I'm no good with numbers either. And I said, but the thing is you're not going to find a cure-all fix. You're not just going to say, oh, we'll spend £5,000 on that person and they're cured. Bye-bye, you're out of the system. It's not going to be like that. We're never ever going to find a cure-all fix. And sometimes you can't complain and say we're spending a huge amount of money on that person and then hopefully they'll go away either. It's not going to be like that. And I don't have the solution. I'm not going to come up with a solution either. But to come at it in a really inhumane, like they have done, by saying, oh, well, we're spending a lot of money on them, so we need to cut it down. I just think that's really inhumane for me, anyway. I just felt awful that day.
Yeah, and a lot of us who are in local councils know that sometimes, we in my group we have an openly non-binary councillor, and the discussions that suddenly has brought up with officers who have never had to consider it before. Have never had to deal with that issue before, suddenly has been brought into light. And so this is why it's so important that we give prominence and get more people of all sorts of disabilities elected. Because, like I said, these issues can be forgotten about or pushed to one side if they're not in the face of people, in terms of that they don't have to deal with it day to day. And I just want to kind of come back to a little bit, because I'm very conscious of the fact that, lots of our listeners and viewers might not run councils, might not be elected, but want to do something to improve their disabled diversity within their local parties. And I was really interested just what you said, Victoria, about whether assuming people can't do something. But then, so I'm just speaking now and being a little bit of a devil's advocate here as well, in the sense that, because we want local parties to be more proactive. We want them on all sorts of issues, more women elected, more people of race elected, more across the whole board, and people with disabilities. So how can we be proactive without assuming? How can we, so if there is someone who is a member in our local party who does have a disability of one kind or another, how can we proactively say, look, we want to help you, without assuming that they need help? How can you get that balance?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think it's partly about demonstrating value. So I think Louie raised a good point about just the sheer variety of activities involved in delivering a successful campaign. And there are a lot of activities within that, even within canvassing, things that need to be done to prepare for canvassing, things that need to be done with data, things that need to be done with artworking. There is so much scope for so many different people to use such a huge variety of skills within that. And you sometimes see in various sort of pockets of the party, people will go about trying to collect data about what special skills people have and when they might use them and when it might be appropriate to do that. But you never sort of see the other side of that after the data's been gathered and what actually happens to it. So if we could in some way, as part of the neurodiversity movement that we're pushing, somehow look to doing something like that, where we can show that there are opportunities for people of such a broad range of backgrounds, and obviously all sorts of things, not just neurodiversity, but disabilities, LGBT+, race, religious background, everything comes into that. And we want to see that, and we want to find a way of encouraging people to bring those skills into everyday so-called LibDeming.
Yeah. Katherine, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think a lot of it is about the atmosphere that local parties have. And I know it's difficult because there are so many local parties that struggle to even find people to run for chair and secretary. But it's about making it obvious that you can raise things and you won't be ridiculed. And it's difficult because obviously we have all sorts of people in the party with all sorts of views, and allowing an open discussion and sort of saying if you have any needs. So it's a bit like if there's ever access funds and things like that, you don't make it hard to apply for it. And it's the same thing with disability support. You don't make it hard to raise. You make it obvious that you are open. You make it obvious that simple things like saying this venue has one small step, but there's a ramp at the back, or something like that. Putting the distance of something instead of the minutes it will take to walk is important, because then wheelchair users or people who are slow walkers can ensure that they can work out if they can go that distance, or if they need to get a taxi or something. And there's loads of little small things that local parties can do. And again, there's a huge difference between assuming and doing it for someone and just saying, oh, do you need anything? And you can phrase that without saying, pointedly, you're a wheelchair user, do you need anything? Or you have a sunflower lanyard, what do you need? You can just say, hey, is everything all right? Anything I can do for you? And you can say that to anyone, because you never know who has a disability. So yeah, I think that there's definite movements within the party, and I think this is true of the main party as well. Conference and things do okay at being accessible, but it's the fact that HQ, if you're a wheelchair user, you have to go in through the back in the loading bay, things like that, where it's not an automatic thought process yet, and it needs to be, and we'll get there.
And given that HQ is moving, now's the time for them to sort it out, isn't it? Absolutely.
Fingers crossed.
No, but go on, Louis.
I just thought of I'm going to have to give a really bad admission. I've never been to a conference yet. I've been a member since 2008. I've never been to a conference yet. And do you know the reason why that is? That's purely down to accessibility. And that's purely down to monetary accessibility. And that's not because I want to get in their free pass. Obviously, of course, it would have been a lot easier to attend the last couple of times because we've had them online. But of course, I have been busy. Those times literally hit when I needed to get focuses out, or literally helping to do with campaigns and stuff. But I'd actually, to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't mind actually going to a physical one rather than virtual. And to be perfectly honest, I've actually become a little bit team fatigued. The amount of stuff where it's sitting there, going on to Teams and Zoom, and I don't mind doing that. It's just, I just think sitting there for hours on end is just a bit relentless. But he says whilst simultaneously, playing on his Xbox. But at the same time, I just think you sort of have to doubly concentrate on that. But it is important to have that thing of there is definitely I think it's definitely important to make sure that our conferences are accessible as much as possible, and I think that's super important for us. And hopefully the HQs maybe moving up a little bit more north, but you never know.
Yeah, if I can jump back in there. I think that's why hybrids are so important. So one of my LDDA colleagues messaged me and asked me something, and I did straight after conference. And I didn't get back to them for about a week because I was completely exhausted, absolutely wiped out. I don't really know what I did for the week after because it was so intense for me. It's usually pretty intense anyway, but for some reason, sort of online, it's so much more exhausting, and studies are suggesting it's because your brain's filling in the slightly like segmented gaps and things when it comes to screen time or computer things I don't quite get. And the colleague was sort of like, oh, I didn't find it as tiring, because to me what's exhausting is going up and down the hills and the stairs. And it's finding that compromise of some people cannot cope with an online conference at all, and others it's the only time they've been able to come to conference for various reasons. So I think it's finding that balance, and that is the one thing we can take from the pandemic. It's been an awful year and a half, 2 years by the time we really get there. But we can take something good from this bad situation. And this is one of those things, trying to maximize accessibility, because the disabled community is huge. And even if you ignore the intersectionality, it's such a diverse amount of disabilities with mental, physical, visible, invisible. And none of us, even our autistic people as a group, we all have different needs. Some are sensory seeking, some are sensory avoidant. And I'm really hopeful that the party can take the lessons from the pandemic and try and really ensure that we're able to engage all our members.
Yeah, and I suppose kind of going back to what we can do locally as well, is that we put together in my local party a kind of a crib sheet of all the various jobs that you can do, not just the big ones like being a counsellor or, you know, organising leaflet drops, but every little thing, whether that's, you know, whether it's a diversity champion or all the bits and pieces that get done in the background that you thought, okay, someone can do that, and just letting all our members and supporters know, okay, you want to get involved. It isn't just door knocking. It isn't just delivering leaflets. There are a multitude of ways you can get involved, which are all vital elements in actually winning. And I think that's one of the things I think we need to do. And that, because it's not just people who are young and have disabilities, or people as they get older might just not be able to be as active as they once were. And it's important that we keep these avenues open so people don't think, well, you know, I can't do 15 miles a day like I used to, so I'm no longer good at campaigning. Is that, I take it you guys agree with that?
Yeah, there was a case, it was one of my young Liberals colleagues, and she was calling someone up to say, hi, I can't remember what she was doing, fundraising or whatever. And she had this conversation, and the woman on the phone was like, well, I'm in a wheelchair now and I can't actually get out and campaign. So, and apparently it's the first time this woman who'd been a party member for a couple of years was actually then asked, do you have any skills you think that could help us? And apparently she's used to be in comms, brilliant, and now she does almost all the comms and the press releases for that party. Yeah. Again, disabled people know our skills, partly because we have to rely on the skills more than, you know, we can't always learn to pick up talents in the way that a lot of non-disabled people can. So just asking us, and that goes for all diversities really, just ask.
Yeah, maybe that's what we should call this episode, is actually just ask. That's that. If we can do one thing, that is it. But it is interesting, and I kind of want to touch on this, because when we talk about electoral success and we look at all the kind of statistics from across the UK, so this isn't just any patch, it generally goes on how much person-to-person contact you have, and then second up is how much direct mail you get out, is kind of the two leading elements. So if you're a person of disability, how best can we adapt our campaigning techniques to get people, or do we have to think, well, we might have to do extra work in one way, so then the person who maybe can't do door knocking can do something in another way? Is that how maybe he or she or they will do more casework? Are you working as a team kind of thing? Is that how you have to approach this? I don't know if Victoria, you want to come in on this one?
I think so, yes, but I think that's an approach that should be taken anyway, just in terms of, you know, delivering something that's going to work for everyone and playing to everyone's strengths. I mean, I've seen sort of, you know, boroughs where this is happening and it works well, but I think we should definitely be looking at how we tailor these activities and our campaigns to the strengths of the local teams.
Louis?
I absolutely fully agree. I mean, I'm constantly told that I'm quite good on the phones and doorstep, but then again, my admin skills are horrendous. But that's self-admittance. So it's not because somebody went, your admin skills are really rubbish, and that's just self-admittance. I just think, you know, although people say you're really good on the phones and the doorstep, and I just think that's because the fact that I used to work in hospitality, so I suppose that's just a bit of background knowledge, and also the fact that I can be quite personable with people. I mean, very recently actually, I was on the doors. Just ignore the tinkle, that's my cat. I was on the doors recently, and I have a milk delivery. It felt very adult. I get my own personal milk delivery now. But I said, this lady had her own. same milk company, and she had a milk crate put up with the milk company's name and thing with her own door number. And I said, that's a really nice milk crate, because she come out and she looks really angry at first. I said, that's a nice milk crate. I said, sorry to be cheeky. I said, where did you get it from? And then just asking that question to her completely threw her off the fact that I was a Liberal Democrat and I had a focus in my hand, big fat focus in my hand and everything. And she said, oh, right. And I threw her off. And after about 30 seconds of a conversation asking about this flipping milk crate, she then eventually voted for us, which was great. So I just thought, oh, yeah, just ask her something randomly that was on the doorstep,
Did you make a note of that in minivan? Milk crate enthusiast or something like that?
No. I put a separate note on my phone to then get the company's name as to where I'm now going to get a personalized milk crate. but the thing is, I think what one skill I definitely think is really quite helpful is, yes, just as you knock on someone's door, quickly look around you if you know someone's going to come to the door and find something on their doorstep or something, like those are nice flowers. They're really sprouting this year, that sort of thing. Or, oh, I like your cat, that sort of thing. Just something quite fun that seems to mildly throw somebody, and that way they go, oh, sorry, what are you here for? And you go, oh, right, I'm here on behalf of, rather than, because obviously if you candidate focus like I am, I just sort of say, oh, I'm here on behalf of Diane, your local councillor or your local Liberal Democrat, and they sort of go, oh, right, yeah, we support you, and that's it, done.
But I think that's a general rule. Is a soft canvassing approach is generally very effective in the terms of that. If you just come up to the door and just knock on and say, "Hi, I'm X. Are you going to vote for me?" You need to talk to them in an actual conversation. Is the key part of it. But what? Okay, this is a kind of a question as we get near the end of our time here. So, what things could the National Party do better, and B, a local party do better? And if I go to Katherine first.
I think the National Party needs to be more inclusive in how it runs things, in how it chooses its campaigns and what it says we can do and who we can be. I don't know of any neurodivergent MPs, for example, and much like how so many of the Liberal Democrats are from the LGBT plus community, there are a lot of neurodivergent Liberal Democrats, whether they know it or not half the time. And I think that it would be nice to see that as something that we push, sort of, look, we have a neurodivergent candidate in a target seat. And again, choosing the campaigns that affect neurodivergent people, much like how LDCRE is pushing for campaigns that affect minority ethnic communities. And there's a huge overlap there, such as access to health and things like that. And a local party to just be more welcoming and accepting of people who have quirks, of people who may need to leave the room for whatever reason. They might be a carer, they might be overwhelmed, they might need to take medication. Just by acknowledging that not everyone is going to fit the same mold, instantly we become so much more welcoming as a party. And it's actually surprising how much people do that, because it's completely automatic, because we all do that. We all assume that everyone's going to be how we are. I do it with neurotypicals, and they're very confused when they do neurotypical things. But yeah, it's just reminding ourselves, especially when we're in a position of welcoming new people and encouraging people to come back, that everyone is different.
Victoria?
Yeah, I definitely concur. I think representation is something that would be very helpful to see in terms of the HQ and the broader party. As far as I know, we don't, or any of us in any of the parties have currently an openly autistic MP, which would be brilliant to see. I'm personally far too tired, but I hope someone does get there very soon, because it would be wonderful to see. But also just thinking about the general messaging as well in the communications that are put out by local parties as well as HQ, just sort of thinking about obviously the way we talk about disabled people, whether what we're talking about is inclusive of disabled people, along those sorts of lines. And I think also in just thinking about it from a local party perspective, it would be nice to see not just more inclusion in terms of the local party as a whole, making sure that activities and campaigning activities are inclusive, but also supporting people with their individual projects to be more inclusive. So, for example, if you see an instance where someone's running an event and, it's held up a flight of stairs, there's no lift, things like that, it's best to sort of offer help. Sort of say, do you need help with this? Would you like some advice? Is there anything you can do to help make this event more accessible? And I think if people felt like they could approach running projects and events knowing that the support is there and that they don't have to fear, getting it wrong, I think that would help a lot of people to have more confidence about running things by themselves.
Louis?
I absolutely wholeheartedly second what Victoria said about running projects, because I'm constantly panicking about, oh my God, is this going to go wrong? Yes, especially in terms of our national MPs, obviously, because we have Selfadmittance who is diverse in terms of somebody who is more physically disabled. Not sure about neurodiverse, and of course we definitely had Norman, bless him, who definitely helps in terms of putting more neurodiversity on a more equal footing when it came to NHS provisions. But in terms of local governance, I think for me, I think we definitely need more us in the council chambers, or perhaps maybe standing as mayoral or what would you call it, the police crime commissioners, etc. candidates wanting to stand, showing that there are differences, perhaps maybe even showing that trying to at least make difference, because of course, especially when it comes to the high number of people who are as Katherine has said, neurodiverse, who end up behind the opposite side of the law, to say, what, we want to make a change, not, if they have done wrong, but perhaps maybe not being necessarily put into reprimand, but perhaps maybe there are differences in ways to handle this. That would be a good way to deal with things. And of course, especially, as I say, in local governance as well, whether they know it or not, would be a way forward. I do think, of course, if people are not necessarily up for it as of yet, to work closely with their local parties, would definitely be a way forward. Even that's to help out in any way possible. Sometimes even the small ways can just help in a big way. So that would be, truly grateful in their local branches and parties.
Thank you, Louis. And I suppose we should just point out that the Liberal Democrat Disability Association isn't just for people with disabilities. It's also for people who are in caring positions and all sorts, or people who are just interested in the topic. It's one of the things we want to do is make sure that on a whole series of these podcasts we have done for the different kind of groups within the Lib Dems is actually raising awareness of what the groups do, getting, Catherine's already seems to be bossing the policy world anyway within the Lib Dems, but actually the work is never ever finished. And actually, and I'll be quite frank, I had never heard of the phrase neurodiversity until this podcast. It had just not something that had come on my radar. But that's the fact that just shows you what we need to do. We all need to learn more. We all need to think, okay, what can we do better? And like you said, maybe it's just a case of just asking people how we can do better to help them or whatever. But no, thank you all so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. You can catch all these guys, like I say, are members of the Liberal Democrat Disability Association. So do go check that out on the website, or do go check them out on Twitter. So I'm sure they'll be very grateful to answer any questions you might have. Do follow the Lib Dem Podcast at LibDem Pod. That's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you want to find us. We are always on Facebook, these videos, along with YouTube, and you can find us on all your podcast providers. So do share us, ask us any questions, give us a like. We're always happy for the support. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back with another episode very soon.